Alright, so in my last video I tried to explain how to do a pad slap on a 2016 Honda CR-V in a minute, and it ended up taking me 2 minutes, but I want to do a better recap, a little deeper dive into it in this video. I'm still going to try to make it short and sweet, so we're going to go ahead and start the video with you having the car jacked up already and the tire off just like that. And as you can see, these brake pads have almost no life left. However, it's not torn up rotors on either side, so the customer doesn't want us to replace the rotors, just the pads. To make it quick and easy, we're not going to do anything with the top bolt for the caliper. We're only going to remove the bottom bolt. That's going to be with a 12mm and lefty-loosey. And I always just use the tool to break them loose first and then go ahead and zing them out. Once it's removed, you can take a flathead screwdriver and just slide it up in the slot to pry it open. Some people will actually come in here and actually try to compress the piston before they remove the caliper just to make sure that it's going to work. However, I don't really recommend that, just because if you put your screwdriver on the rotor, if you're not replacing the rotor, you can do some damage to the rotor. So you don't have to, as long as you can compress the piston once it's off. But again, put your screwdriver in here and just pry it up. Then just pull it up, and you can just push it out to get that pin to pop out on the back side, and the whole caliper is off. And then I typically just set it up on top of the rotor itself. However, be mindful of that dust shield in the back, because a lot of times you can bend that, and then when you go to drive it afterwards, you're going to hear like a... But with that being said, on this model, we're going to go ahead and remove these two little springs, and then we're just going to pop the pads out from the brackets. 1 and 2. Once we have the pads out, we're going to go ahead and remove the hardware like this. Same thing, prying it out, top and bottom. Now here in Texas, we don't get a lot of rust, but I'm still going to just hit this with some brake clean and wipe it off with a rag. Once you do that, just grab your new hardware and pop it in place. I always find it easiest if you put it kind of like on an angle and then just pop backwards. Do that on both sides and you'll be good to go. Once that's done, you can go ahead and remove your lower pin by getting that little boot off and then just sliding it out. And you can just leave that top pin in. Then just use a rag and some brake clean to clean them off, just like that, and then put some grease on it. And when I say grease, you need to get brake parts lubricant grease, because it's for high temperatures, which your brakes will get extremely hot when braking. And you don't have to go crazy with the grease, just get a nice little layer of it on there. And if you've ever seen how much grease comes from the factory, it's barely any at all. This is a lot more, trust me. But then comes the fun part. All you gotta do is stick it in the hole, slide her in and out a few times, make sure she's moving nice and freely, get that boot to seal back on it so that it's gonna keep all the dust out, and you're gonna be good to go. Do that for the top one as well. Once that's done, you gotta get your piston to go back in, so you can grab an old brake pad and then either some channel locks. Some people use channel locks. Just be careful, because you don't want to crack this piston. But in all reality, you can get this tool super cheap, and it just spins in and out to push that back in. And once you have your tool installed using the old pad, which I have the pad material against the piston, all you gotta do is twist the handle and it'll slowly but surely go back in. But if it doesn't want to go in nice and freely, you probably have an issue either inside the line itself or inside your caliper. So you need to figure out what's going on there. But hopefully you don't have that issue and you can just twist this in. Now, I've seen comments on other videos where mechanics or whatever are trying to say that you're not supposed to do that you're not supposed to push the old fluid back into the system, and that you're supposed to crack open the bleeder and push it out that way. However, my thoughts on it are, this is a sealed system, so the fluid inside is not new or old or dirty or whatever, right? It's all going to be the same throughout the entire car. So pushing it back up the hose like it came from isn't going to be a big difference. But with that being said, at this point, we're just going to go ahead and put a little bit of grease on these slides. Again, we don't need a ton of grease, because we don't need dust and dirt and all that kind of stuff getting clogged up in there. It's just to help the pad slide back and forth. And be careful that you don't get it on the rotor itself. And if you don't want to put it on the slides, you can just put it on the top of the brake pads, these little nubs, because that's what's going to ride in there anyway. So that's a little bit easier way to do it. With that being said, this is the inner right-hand side. So I am on the passenger side of the car. That's the right-hand side. And this one's going to go on the inside. If you don't know, this always goes on the inside towards the top. And the outer doesn't have one, so it can just go on either side as long as it's on the outer. We just get it lined up and then slide her in. And what I found is a lot of times it's easier if you kind of put it in on an angle and then just snap it over to the rotor. Now, the brake pads that I got didn't come with these little springs, so we're just going to reinstall the old ones. You're going to put them in the top 2 holes like that, and then you're going to grab the other one and put them in these bottom 2 down here. And those are just meant to help pull those off the rotor. And that way the pads aren't going to wear down prematurely. So now we're almost done. All we got to do is take this and slide it back in up top. And then I like to wiggle it back and forth again, just to make sure it's going to freely move back and forth. Get it lined up with the brake pads, and then drop her down. And then at the bottom, you're going to have to push that bottom pin back in, just so it'll seat, so you can put your bolt back in. And once you're ready, just tighten it back up. Oh, I almost forgot. One more thing that you can do is, while these are out, you can put some grease on the back of these pads, and that'll just help them from sticking to the caliper itself. Then just put your tire back on, making sure to clean off the rotor if you got any grease on it first. Just use some brake clean and a rag. But then most importantly, before you try to drive this thing, you got to go back into your cab. You have to press the brake pedal down until the pedal gets nice and hard again. That way you know that that piston pushed the pads back out to the rotor, so you'll have brakes when you stop. If you don't do that, guys, and you try to drive this thing, the moment you try to stop, your foot's going to go to the floor just like it did when I first started here. And you're going to have to keep pumping it until finally that fluid pushes the pistons out far enough to grab onto the rotor and stop the vehicle. So super scary. I've seen another tech actually drive through a concrete wall with it because he forgot to pump up the brakes and threw it in reverse. The wall is only 10 feet behind him. By the time he got it pumped up, the wall was already knocked over. But that's about as easy as it gets, and now you know.